Right now, in a clinic somewhere across Canada, a mother and her family grapple with the anguish of a devastating diagnosis. Her children, their hearts heavy with anxiety, are called back into the doctor's office and are about to be told that their mother, who has been complaining of a nagging pain, has suspicious spots on her liver and pancreas. As a medical professional, she sensed something wrong long before the diagnosis will confirm her fears. Her family, having initially dismissed her concerns, can hardly imagine that cancer is the culprit. In moments, their world will be turned upside down. The tug-of-war between anxiety and hope, coupled with the challenge of making each day count, will shape the next 2 years. This heart-wrenching moment is far from unique. Just like our family 2 years ago, 16 other Canadian families will receive the same grim news each day, facing a future overshadowed by pancreatic cancer, a disease that has seen no meaningful progress in 20 years. The current 5-year net survival for pancreatic cancer in Canada sits at only 10%, meaning out of every 10 Canadians diagnosed, only 1 will survive beyond 5 years. This reality is not just a personal tragedy, but a national disgrace that highlights systemic failures in Canada's approach to pancreatic cancer. Canada is only now beginning to lay the groundwork for policies that should have been established years ago, policies that represent an overdue investment into the future of Canadians with pancreatic cancer. These initiatives promise to bring improved trial access and engagement for Canadians in neglected rural areas and regions beyond the cancer care capital cities of Ontario, British Columbia, Quebec, and Alberta. But they are still years away from becoming a reality. With the average Canadian living just 3.8 months after diagnosis, the cost of these delays will be measured in thousands of lives. Barriers to progress, clinical trials and regulatory challenges, stagnant survival rates, limited access to clinical trials focused on precision medicine, and sluggish regulatory processes by Canadian regulatory authorities have stalled progress for decades. With CMJA projections suggesting that pancreatic cancer will become one of the top 3 leading cancer deaths, by the end of this year, immediate action is crucial. We cannot afford to drag our feet while countless families face devastation and heartbreak. Urgent intervention is needed to address these profound shortcomings and ensure that every Canadian has a fighting chance for survival, regardless of their situation. No more riding on American success. The stark contrast between pancreatic cancer progress in Canada and the United States reveals a critical failure in our healthcare system. The United States has led the way with annual increases in survival rates, which currently sit at 13% as of this year. While a 3% difference may not seem huge, if we acknowledge that this 3% increase took place in only the last few years, the United States is on track to reaching PANCAN's goal of a 20% survival rate by the year 2030. This progress is largely attributed to organizations like the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, PANCAN, which has successfully advocated for substantial federal funding. PANCAN's campaigns have secured millions of dollars from Congress, underscoring a robust, transparent, and visible commitment to advancing pancreatic cancer research and treatment. Their efforts have not only driven research forward, but also raised public awareness and mobilized support at the highest levels of government. It's a common but erroneous assumption to conflate American survival rates with our own. Canada can no longer afford to ride the coattails of American success. We must stop delaying and start taking, as Chrystia Freeland would say, bold, immediate action. Our country needs to secure substantial funding and enforce robust policy changes now, as pancreatic cancer becomes one of the top 3 causes of cancer-related deaths. The time for complacency and passive reliance on external advancements is over. Canada must lead its own charge against this devastating disease and ensure that our patients have a fighting chance. Urban versus rural, the unequal fight against pancreatic cancer in Canada. The disparity in pancreatic cancer outcomes between urban and rural areas significantly exacerbates this crisis. Research highlights that rural patients often face substantial barriers to accessing specialized cancer care, specifically high-volume centers and clinical trials, which are concentrated in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and British Columbia in the country's urban cities. Princess Margaret Cancer Centre is the trophy hub of Ontario and the largest clinical research centre in Canada, boasting more than 700-plus active trials. But what about the more than 30% of Canadians living outside metropolitan areas? A study in 2022 revealed that rural patients are more likely to experience delays in diagnosis and receive less advanced treatment compared to their urban counterparts, leading to worse outcomes. Chung et al., 2022. Similarly, a study published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology found that patients in rural areas are less likely to participate in clinical trials due to geographic and logistical challenges. Sullivan et al., 2021. Existing policies and commitments that aim to address the divide between rural and urban areas of Canada have not translated into more trial availability or better outcomes for Canadians. While we are beginning to see precision medicine-focused trials slowly increase in Canada, they are not offered in every province. As of today's clinicaltrials.gov search, with the exception of Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec, there were no precision medical trials for people with pancreatic cancer. 0. There is an urgent need for Canada to both fund and reform pancreatic cancer care. Additionally, clinical trial participation, which has been repeatedly shown to improve survival rates and treatment efficacy, Temro et al. 2020, is not actively promoted or integrated into standard care discussions. But again, how could they be? With no clinical trials taking place outside of urban areas, how can oncologists pitch clinical trials when there are none? These findings underscore the urgent need for a more equitable distribution of cancer care resources to ensure that all Canadians, regardless of location, can access the best possible treatment and support. Onivyde again. Denied funding, despite proven survival benefits. As negotiations continue to fail. Compounding, the issue is the troubling decision by Canadian regulatory bodies to block funding for Onivyde. This promising chemotherapy drug, approved by Health Canada in 2017 following the Phase 3 Napoli trial results, has demonstrated significant improvements in both overall and progression-free survival compared to current chemotherapy regimens. In 2020, Pancreatic Cancer Canada rang the alarm after reporting that despite Health Canada's approval, the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance, PCPA, had blocked Onivyde's funding. This decision was made almost 4 years ago, and the most recent negotiations, concluded as of May 2024, still resulted in no agreement, leaving Canadians without access to this crucial third-line therapy. Onivyde has already been approved for financing in the United States, Europe, Australia, and Japan, where patients benefit from 3 lines of treatment. In contrast, Canadians are limited to just 2. The delay in funding negotiations, stretching over 7 years, underscores a significant problem within Canada's drug pricing and approval system. The PCPA, established to negotiate drug prices on behalf of federal, provincial, and territorial governments, operates with a lack of transparency and oversight. Its processes and decisions are shrouded in secrecy, leaving Canadians questioning why essential drugs like Onivyde remain inaccessible. The PCPA's operations, which are crucial for drug pricing negotiations, are not subject to the usual scrutiny of public accountability, such as freedom of information requests or parliamentary oversight. Infoway, 2023. MacDonald Laurier Institute, 2023. With a survival rate of only 10% and only 2 chemotherapy options available, this delay in securing funding for Onivyde represents a severe neglect of the urgent needs of pancreatic cancer patients. Despite clear evidence of Onivyde's effectiveness in extending life, Goldberg et al., 2018, the continued withholding of funding reflects a disregard for the pressing needs of Canadians battling this aggressive disease. Surprisingly, Canada's biggest cancer organization, Canadian Cancer Society, has been startlingly silent on the issue. The question arises, Can the Canadian government legally intervene in the negotiations between